Okay. So I think, um, Paul, you have a comment?
It's just about what you had been talking about before. I didn't want to.
Oh, the VOCs. Oh, you have inside information for Will.
I've already given it to Will, but I'm giving it to everybody else now.
Oh, okay. Great. Okay. So that's healthy or home performance.
Yeah, that's the HPC practitioner conference
Yeah.
that
Okay.
Will went to last April and
Okay, cool.
go to this time. And not that I have any influence as track chair, but
Not at all. Not that you would favor your own people either.
all I said was this is a little more insight into what the session would be about. It's up to you all to decide whether it's of sufficient value.
Okay.
And
Okay.
when our most um heavily practitioner sided person on the committee said, I want to hear that one, that swayed it. And that was not me.
Cool. Okay, well, you're in the hot seat now. Got to be good. You're in demand. Um, okay. So let's talk about the getting through the institutional review board. Is there anyone here who has not gone through that process?
I haven't. Don't even know what it is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm guessing that some of the more junior people have not had to do it. Misa, I think you haven't had. In fact, if you do not have experience with this includes you, Pi. You may want to involve yourself just so you know what it's like to do this as research. It doesn't mean you need to take the full control, but you should probably be aware. And that reminds me, Pi, do you have human subjects training through your other institution? I think you're on, I can't hear you, even though you unmuted yourself. Still can't. You can type in the chat until you get your audio working.
I'm sure he was saying he has extensive experience doing IRBs, and yes, he has
Okay,
the
cool,
training.
cool. Because so for people who haven't done it, um, it is required that we submit for review anything we're doing involving people in research. Um, and anybody who has access to I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but anybody who has access to private information needs to take the human subjects training. Jordan, I'm guessing you will not need to take it. But and I think everybody else except maybe Danny has not or has taken it. And Naomi, I'll catch up with you later, but you should probably have it here if it doesn't translate. Um, yeah, well, I figured you would have had to do it. So the purpose of it, Jordan, is that researchers have been kind of bad in the past, and they have used people to gather information, and sometimes those individuals did not benefit or were put at risk because of the research, and we don't want to do that anymore. And so there's a board at our university and at most or all universities that looks at what we're going to do and makes determinations about whether the risk is acceptable or whether there isn't a risk. Now, some of our things are declared to be not human subjects research, even if people are around them, because we're only measuring things in their homes. Um, But this field study, I don't believe, is going to be one of them. I mean, it is not going to be one of them, just to put all the knots in the right place. We will need to go through human subjects research, and this will be a complicated protocol because as an integrative team, we're trying to do a lot of stuff at once. And that means we're going to need to explain all of it. So I wanted to start maybe with you, Erica and Pi, because you have these 5 surveys or maybe 6. And so tell me about your plans for including that in the protocol.
Yeah, so Pi's actually done a really good job putting these together. And I think he actually just sent me this morning after our meeting the like finalized version, and we were gonna send it to Mary Lee for her review. So whenever we are like ready to do the IRB, we have like a near final version of these surveys to include. And they're on Qualtrics, so we can either print them out as PDF and attach or provide the IRB with the Qualtrics link.
Okay, cool. And I believe these are all going to be under a single protocol because they're all the same people, but I don't know. I'm going to
Yeah.
talk to.
I would imagine this whole thing would be one IRB umbrella protocol.
I know, and it's going to be a big mess. So I'm going to talk to Kathy about how she wants it to appear before we actually start doing it. Okay, so you guys are near ready with the surveys, it sounds like.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah, we've just been like wordsmithing them, and then like we have some placeholders because we don't have like the final screenshots of the display. But we have like placeholders and the questions are all there. So yeah, they're very ready to be deployed.
Okay, cool. And then I heard that Misa had some questions for you guys, and so going through that a little bit might be a good thing, but in general, it's not it as long as we have something close to final to put in, the fact that it's going to change a little bit is not a problem. Okay, let me skip to not the hard one. The home measurements that we are doing, pollution, or sorry, air pollutants, and the pressures, those are already described in the protocol we submitted for the Epic homes. So we will just replicate that. And that was already declared to be not human subjects training, or not training, sorry. I don't know what's coming out of my mouth. Not human subjects research. Even though I might dispute that because we're looking at people's pressures, the rest of it is going to get us into human subjects research anyway. But it may be helpful for them to know that they've already approved a chunk of it. Okay, so now the intervention. As part of submitting the protocol, and there are people here who have much more experience than I do, and so please speak up. We're going to have to describe the risks to the subjects of the intervention. And I would like to know how we plan to approach that. So tech team, help me out here.
So I think the way I see it, there are really 3 primary ways in which the intervention could have an impact on the people. One is noise, one is airflow, and one is the alerts or whatever feedback we are providing, and whether that ends up being annoying or helpful.
Okay, so noise alerts and the airflow.
Well, right.
Okay,
Yeah,
look, maybe we should get all those on the table. Christian, do you agree with that? To agree with putting all the possible avenues of risk on the table first and discussing how to characterize them?
yes, I got a couple others that I put on the table, but I agree with those, and I think there's a couple others that come to mind, but yeah.
What do
I
you got,
agree pretty much.
Christian? Let's put them all on the table.
Yeah, I think we have a non-zero risk of increasing their air pollution. So if we have a leaking filter or failing the filter, we have a case of actually increasing exposure instead of decreasing. So we gotta disclose that one. We have a potential risk of damage to their home, so I think we have to disclose that one. Those are the other two. Now, I think both could be like described and mitigated, but I think those are the other two disclosures that come to mind that we need to do.
And
The
Yeah,
third,
definitely fire damage.
the third one that comes to mind is and I don't know if we put into tech or communications or what, but we are going to be in some ways tracking behavior with some of their interactions with the hardware. Like there is a case that could be made that we could know when they're home and some of those pieces based on the type of information that we're collecting. So a privacy thing.
Okay, that's
On the
a,
privacy
yeah,
side, there's also
good
just,
point.
we're going to have data on names, addresses, and contact information. And while that doesn't tend to be sensitive, it is still personal information.
Right. And so we have, as part of the Epic Homes, we describe how we're dealing with that. So they're only identified by site number. And then as soon as we're done with the analysis, we're going to remove that information, which is why I ask you not to write their Wi-Fi password on the on the site forms. So, but yes, good point, Paul. Address and so on. We will have to describe how that's kept private. So for most of this, we're going to refer to the sites by number or letter. And most people that don't have to visit the homes won't even know where they are. Okay, other sources of risks and sources of potential privacy loss.
So there is the inconvenience of having to be home probably while the work is being done, while the interventions are being installed. If we have not already done things like blower door tests on the homes that we end up including in the study, then there's a short-term potential discomfort. I've had to include that in IRBs in the past, and it's always like, look, this is like 20 minutes. It's not a big deal. It's really minimal risk, but when you're trying to really make sure that you include everything, you include everything. And
Yeah, and I
so,
think we have
some of those
actually written up.
diagnostics fit.
Sorry, Paul.
Go ahead.
No, I think we have written up the blower door test because we did it for the Epic Homes.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of this. I'm just putting everything
Yeah,
on the table
that's
that I
right.
think fits into this protocol, even if we already have all the text for some
Great.
of it.
Anything else?
I mean,
Okay.
we could always say
ahead.
that we, I don't know if we really want to get into this one, but I'm going to put it out there that there is, I think, a chance that if the system is running, then it has a mental aspect to it where they like, oh, things must be really bad outside, and it could end up being a stressor. Independent of noise and airflow, there could be, I think, a mental or emotional aspect to it.
Meaning the awareness of air pollution outside might cause a stress for them.
Ignorance is bliss. Lack of ignorance is lack of bliss.
Oh, wait, what? Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so I've got a list of risks of the intervention. um, uh, risks to their privacy, and then discomforts like the blower door test. And that, I guess that is it is a risk. I don't know if I put it in the same category, but we would list it. Anyone else? So then we need to communicate how high these risks are or how great these risks are. And we need to say how we know that. And what the board is going to do is judge whether the risk to the participants is worth the knowledge that we would gain.
Yeah, my biggest concern from the tech side, at least, to be honest, is the risk of increasing their exposure. And this is just purely, I don't think it's actually a high risk of it happening, just but purely based on my experience with the CSU IRB recently. I think I have good text on digital privacy. We have good text on preparing things in their home. But I think we're going to have to think very carefully on, we know there's a problem outside and we're going to test a technology that's taking bad outdoor air and in theory pumping inside their home, right? I think there's going to be a technological telling that story in a really convincing way to the IRB that the risk is low, super low, is the hard one. Now, I think it is low, and I think we can do it well, but in the places that IRB has pushed back on us recently, I think that is the highest, the one I am most worried about them just saying, I don't see the benefit in you doing it right now.
Go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, Christian, I put in the chat, that's the one that I think is the most materially possible and also more difficult to justify why the intervention should still be tested. One thought I had, and I wondered if you've already talked with IRB about this, is the route, I know you've probably gone with John before, of like sharing what the risk is akin to. So in the case of increasing exposure, my thought was it would be as similar to someone choosing to open their window over sealing up their home, which I think gives people an opportunity to think about what they would do and then opt out of the study if they're like, well, I would never open my windows or doors when a wildfire is happening, regardless of how thermally uncomfortable I am. And that can give them like a point of reference. I don't know. Have you tried talking with IRB about this already?
No,
I
have not. I'm
okay.
intending to do that, hoping like right after the holiday.
Yeah, because I think the two comparisons that made sense to me when thinking about like what is taking on this risk like, it would be like there's a wildfire and you're hot or cold and you choose to open the windows or doors. So that's one, and I think many people maybe wouldn't do that. The other is to maybe liken it, we could compare to what it's like to like cook in your home, which I think brings it somewhat on par with, or like at least I think they're within order of magnitude. And I think the point, like thinking about the point of communicating the risks and benefits on the one hand is for IRB to make some assessment, but it's also for the person consenting to the study to make some assessment. And so one person may hear that and say, yeah, I'm okay with that, I understand it, whereas another person may not. And I think that's the goal on the participant facing side. So just building on what Christian you shared, I share your view, and I've thought a little bit about like how at least I would try to communicate. I don't know how IRB will receive that.
No, I agree. I think we've got to put it in context. The other, I think I hadn't thought of the cooking one. I think it's a great one because I do think actually the cooking exposures may be greater than some of our
Right.
likely increases, but I'm sure the
Yeah.
home data might be a good one. The one that I had thought might be the other comparison point is it's going to be a similar to the exposure you're going to get anyway commuting to and from work during these events, or those sort of similar exposures. I think we can tell this story. I think the risk is actually not high. We knew some of the data that Carson has. I think it's actually going to be a really valuable data set of it's not frequent, it's not high, so we can like, I don't want to say minimize because that sounds like we're downplaying it, but like put in context. This is not years of you being a smoker, right? This is a couple events in short duration, right? Over a year, it's only going to be a fractional increase type thing. So I think we could put it into context, which is going to be useful. I think we're just going to have to be really deliberate in our storytelling and putting it into context, or they're just going to put up their hands and say, this seems silly. Why are you doing this? Because it seems silly at first. You're taking bad outside air and putting it into somebody's home, right? If you only read it quickly, that's what it's going to sound like. So we just need to be deliberate.
I think you may also want to signal, because I think all these ideas are good. Typically, if you're talking within the, in the risk communication literature, they talk about making the comparison to something that the person already knows about, making a reasonable comparison. So these are all, I think, really good ideas. The other thing I was thinking about, and it just dawned on me, kind of, Christian, when you were talking and Ellison, I think if there may need to be something about if you have a family member who is asthmatic or a family member who has certain health conditions that I don't know if we want to say to them, like, you don't qualify, or because they would be more impacted by a smaller situation. And so, or someone who's pregnant, things like that. I could see where IRB might be concerned about those vulnerable populations from that standpoint. And I don't have any brilliant ways to deal with it, but I think it's something that we would want to consider.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think people here have a lot of experience with, for those of you who are thinking, no, but we're going to reduce pollution. I think there's been a lot of experience with IRB saying, but what if you don't, kind of thing. And I think that's what you're getting at, Christian and Ellison, is that it's one of the risks. We're saying we're going to mess with the exposure pattern, therefore we're changing their exposure.
So I'll give it an analogy to this. Some of the radon work that I've done is some of the projects have been where I temporarily seal off the passive pipe where you have radon resistant new construction. That passive pipe is assumed to be letting some of the radon gas skip the house. And so by sealing it off, that means you're increasing their exposure. Now, I've had some IRBs look at that and say, this is not human subjects research in the first place. You're testing houses, not people. And then I've had other IRBs, specifically Department of Energy, say, yeah, we need to see everything. And I did exactly what Ellison is talking about. I said, look, we're talking about 3 weeks of sealed pipe, and assuming a high level of exposure consistent for the entire 3 weeks, it is this fraction of the risk of what I used in that case was the risk of death in childbirth in the United States. Obviously, in some countries, the risk of death in childbirth is a lot higher. I don't remember how we got to using that as the comparison point, because it's kind of a weird one. But
Yeah,
I remember
that's kind of weird to me too.
it is kind of weird. But I remember we ended up, and I was working with folks at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory to work through this. We ended up with that, and that is the kind of thing that really got the IRB on board. Okay, you're saying that
Wow.
it's a fraction of something that almost never happens. Okay.
Oh, okay, well, yeah, we're gonna have to work on that story because I'm not sure I would buy it as I think it depends on our IRB board. So I think we're pretty much agreed. I don't hear anyone objecting to this being a focus of our presentation. We don't have to figure out the story right now. We've had some good ideas about how to begin that story, but I think what I'm hearing from people is one of the greatest risks is increasing people's exposure instead of decreasing it. Christian and Danny have a little chat going on the side saying, can we make the system shut off if it's increasing exposure? This probably gets into some of the stories or scenarios that you were talking about. And so maybe when we have that discussion, we can also say what should happen in terms of risk and how that gets communicated to IRB. I want to leave it there unless people are dissatisfied and think we need to talk out more things about that particular issue. We accept that it's important and will be flagged and that we need to deal with it and have a good story. I have, maybe this is just my lack of knowledge about the tech side. I have concern about the potential damage to the home, and especially the homes that are going to be modified, not with an air filter, but with attachments. Can people tell me something about that if you're not concerned about it, or if, yeah, so what do you have to say about that?
There's two types of damage that could happen to the home. One is we are cutting holes and it gets done badly. And the other is people are in their house and like we knock over a lamp and break it or something like that. The latter of those is something that happens anytime you do field work. We just, we have to acknowledge that there's a risk. In terms of the first one, we're going to use licensed contractors and the type of work that we're doing. This specific system is different, but the type of work we're doing is nothing that is inherently different from standard practice whenever anybody installs a forced air distribution system. And so it is not, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just gonna ask what the disposition is afterward. Like, are we expected to remove it and then patch it up? That would be what I'm more concerned about. I'm pretty sure a contractor knows how to drill it. Well, I shouldn't be sure about that, but that a contractor knows how to create a hole for a ducting system. I'm less confident that people do a good job of covering it up and making sure that the homeowner is satisfied with how it is left. We've been really we've been really careful about even the little holes we drill, and I still feel like we're, we can, it's hard to match the paint. It's hard to, that's a trouble already, and those holes are tiny.
Oh, and that's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, if we just leave the system, then we don't have to worry about the patching. If we're patching, then there is a real issue of matching the finishes that are there. And so I think one of the things that we're gonna want to do about that is be clear with the resident up front and work with them to identify a place where those holes would be cut that would be more amenable to patching in a way where you can more easily match the surrounding finish.
Yes, but and it's still hard to match the surrounding finish. And my guess is the contractors may be expert at cutting or at installing HVAC, but they're not interior decorators. It's a different skill, as we have learned. So yeah, go ahead.
I was also just going to add to that. I know we have kind of alluded to or brought up before kind of this idea of, well, if we take it out, and that's a larger conversation. I will say I feel very uncomfortable with the idea that something at this level of technology maturity would be left. I feel very, very uncomfortable with that as an option. We can talk more about that, but and it's like I said, much longer conversation probably than what we're going to do right now. But let me just toss that out on the table.
So I always had the thought of us taking over the very, very last vent in their ducting run as far away from their furnace as possible. We cap off the very, very tip and we take over that last vent and we push in through that last vent. So we don't have to go into anywhere where they would ever notice us being there, but the tech underneath the floor or in the attic, hopefully not, is going to be able to cap, replace, and then swap back out their original furnace setup. And then they'll never know that we're there. If they stay inside the house, there's going to be some tape and some glue and stuff that the HVAC guy is going to have to do, but they would never know we were there.
You still have to go to the outside of the house. You were correct. On the inside, that might be a path to minimize the indoor, but yeah, I do hear you on the inside.
So I think there could be potential mitigating setups like what you described, Jordan. I think we would be wise to plan that they could not always be implemented. And so I'm planning for worst case. We have to do some addition. Like we never know what it is until we get there, right? And then we're like, oh no. And so planning for the worst case where we do have to go through the through the floor or something, regardless of what we decide about leaving the system, I think that we should be prepared to remove it if they so request. And that means we have to be ready for that. And whether we decide we're going to pull all of them or only some of them, we have to be ready for that possibility. And it's not trivial to patch a wall and make it invisible or a floor. And we found that just with paint. So that's a concern that I have. With regard to any kind of damage that I have found the university to be relatively unsympathetic to the occupant.
Oh, I'm sympathetic to the occupant. I thought you were going to say like very, very strict on surprised
No.
to hear that.
Yeah. They, the position of risk management is that that's why the occupant has insurance. And so that I don't subscribe to that view.
I have all the opinions about that, but I will save those for not a recorded meeting.
I can put I can take the recording off. Yes, I have probably, or I have strong opinions as well. So, so I'm just saying we should be prepared for that. Right. And it's just not, it's not a trivial thing. It's like, yeah, and a lot of people are proud of their home's aesthetic qualities, right? As we are learning, people care more about how their home looks than about how it functions. Uh, thank you, Will. I think we were part of the same learning experience. So let's just put that on the table, that's the thing I'm concerned about. That I feel we owe it to the people that we're engaging with to leave their home as we would like ours to be left. And we should be prepared in every way to do that. Okay, so we covered the air pollution increasing or decreasing. We covered the risk of damage to the home. The other ones that we listed are noise, alerts, airflow, stress because of awareness, and then one that we didn't put was increased energy costs.
Yeah, I actually had thought about that and realized that I hadn't mentioned that. And we should definitely quantify what those costs are. And that'll be, some combination of what is the energy use of the fan and how much do we think it's going to run based on historical conditions. But yeah, we definitely want to include that.
Ding, Jordan's putting together economic model. Yes, I think so. I think part of the mitigation plan for that is really highlighting the number of ways the occupant is going to be able to say no more and turn it off. So thinking through what that workflow is going to be, and that probably maybe raises the importance of us finalizing what that workflow is and how long we want people to be able to shut it off for and all those. We have those functionalities, but we haven't decided what the timings for shutting things off. So we don't have to decide that now either, but probably it raises the importance of that because I do think we'll want to include those sort of details in the protocol. They cause the system to sleep for 5 minutes or 5 hours.
So Christian, are you saying that the things that are remaining are in some way mitigatable because the occupant will have the ability to shut it off if it becomes a burden? Or I think I made too far of a leap there.
I don't think that is the only piece that we need to convey to the IRB, but a lot of those pieces, I think part of the story is, well, if noise is becoming overly burdensome, they'll have the ability to stop it at that moment. Or if they're feeling not necessarily stressed about the fact that they know air pollution is going on, but if they're getting stressed because the system is running, they'll be able to stop it, right? There is a level of control that they will have that I think it's important that we convey back to the IRB that at all times the user will be able to say, stop the system, which is not necessarily the same thing as them stopping participation. I think that's going to be important for us to convey that there may be times participants say, I need a break, or I need this to stop for 10 minutes. Noise, I mean, a number of pieces.
Is there a way too that we can show them what the noise will be before they say yes or no? I think that would be really helpful.
It's actually harder than you might think because it's not just like how noisy is the fan, but where is the fan? What's between them and the fan? It's going to be different if it's an attic versus a crawl space versus a basement. It's going to be different if it's a finished basement versus an unfinished basement and whether people tend to spend time down there. So, we can talk about sound ratings, but the actual sound they hear depends on a lot of factors that we're not really going to be able to give them an idea, a really good idea about before we get there. And we can take the fan and turn it on and say, this is how loud the fan is.
Mhm.
And we could throw it in the space where we think we're going to locate it, but it's still not until it's been installed and you've now got this penetration through the floor that allows the sound to transmit better. It's not really going to be reliable. So I would love to be able to do that, but it's not. I just don't think it's going to be reliable enough to be an IRB solution.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I was thinking in part about people just kind of like, oh, they're concerned about a noise would be enough for them to say, I don't want to be involved. Oh, I had one thing we can have, and I'm sure it would be in the IRB protocol, would be they can opt out at any time. That they don't have to. And I think that will solve some of these things. You have the right to opt out. That's a typical approach that can be taken to address some of the risks or some of the feelings IRB may have that people feel like you're taking over too much of their lives or something like that, and reminding them of that opt out. Not that we want them to take it, but that can be another approach.
Yeah.
Right. And if they got referred to us through some program or another, it does not, their decision on whether to stay in our project does not impact whatever participation they might have for that program. That's something we're always having to do with weatherization. Your choice does not affect whether you get weatherization services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So am I hearing, again, the ones that we have remaining are noise alerts, airflow stress due to awareness and increased energy costs. I imagine we can quantify the energy costs and we can, I don't know, I guess we can measure the draw of it, but we're not going to measure the increased need for heating. So I'm not sure if how we're able to account for that. And the occupant won't be, unlike the other things, the occupant will not be sensing it. They might see it later in their bill. The ones that they're sensing are the noise, the alerts, the airflow, and the awareness. And so I'm hearing people say that there's some amelioration because they are allowed to opt out and they're allowed to turn off the device. Is that good enough?
I think that's one. I think it will also help for us to put, similar to putting it in context about how much their exposure is, putting into context that it's not going to be running that often, we think, right? Using this historical, thing that Carson has pulled up before, over this period of, 3 weeks or whatever, we're gonna be in the house, here's what our kind of upper, lower, best guess estimate balance are, right? We can put some of these things, bounding boxes on them. I think that might help. So we don't anticipate the blower running 24 hours a day for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to be perfect, but I do think it will help some of the concern for some of these things. You're not going to get 90 messages a day. Over these couple of weeks, you'll probably get 4 messages because you think there's going to be 4 events. 10 plus or minus 5 is our best guess. Is a better thing than 100 a day. I think I think it's going to be dangerous for us not to put these things in context, because just simply saying this thing is going to be running lets people's minds run in lots of different places, and they go to the worst place when that happens. So if we can provide, I think a reasonably scientifically valid approach that we've taken historical data to get a best guess estimate of what's going to happen will help a lot. We think you'll get 10 messages, or based on historical, this is in the ballpark. I think will help a lot with these things. Now it's gonna be
And
hard to quantify like cost and all that, but
And I think we can actually do some amount of quantification of, like, for the period of the study, like how long is the study in place for? You know, if we're saying, and I agree with this, if we're saying that we're going to assume that the systems can be removed, that they would only remain if, one, they really are working well and we like the outcomes and the people want to keep them. Right. And if they want to keep them, now they've decided that that's worth it to them. But for the period of the study, we could even say, let's say this thing ran 100% of the time for the duration of the study. This is the estimated energy cost. It's actually not going to be that big.
Yeah, so we should, so I think you're saying by quantifying some of these things and then maybe putting maximum bounds on them, we can communicate both to the occupant and to IRB. Like, this is as bad as we think it's going to get.
Right. Yeah. If we did something like, say, if it ran a 24/7 for the duration of the study, this is how much it would cost. Let's look at the Cameron Peak fire. How much would it have run during the Cameron Peak fire?
Mm,
That's a really that's a really severe case for Fort Collins, and it wasn't 100% of the time, and so we could put on some different percent and say, so it would actually have been this.
yeah, but I think we could, that's a great idea, putting an extreme and known case where people have the sense that it likely will not get that bad again, or it would very rarely get that bad. If we use that as a quantifier, that might be really helpful. Okay, I've heard some good ideas here. Seems like we need help putting together some of these descriptions, especially estimates of how much we'll be running, and then some kind of analysis of the potential impact of exposure. It sounds like, I think we've hinted at talking through scenarios as a team, and maybe that would be helpful. I still, so I think there's going to be some teamwork to do once we get a description of the potential exposure risk, telling a good story in that way. I still haven't heard great ideas on repairing homes. We'll we'll figure that out, but please know that I don't want to go into a home without a plan.
I have a thought or two on that I just decided I didn't want to get into the weeds on this call.
Okay, yeah, no, that's totally fair. Appreciated.
My
We'll
sense is that since this is largely tech team stuff, that some of it will be probably Christian led, some of it will be me led, a little bit of it might be you led, Tammy, but it's mostly going to be, here are the items we want to do, who's kind of taking the lead on crafting language around it. And it's
right.
mostly the three of us. Is that correct?
I think Allison will have, and Marilee, people have spoken up to have some good ideas. So yes, I agree with that we'll probably start it, but we'll seek input from everybody else. Also, let's remember that, and I know nobody's forgotten this, but I'm just putting a pin in it for myself, that everything that we imagine can be done has to be able to be done by the field team. They have to be able to understand why they are doing it and how to do it, and it has to fit in their already full day. So that that doesn't affect the IRB, but it does affect what we promise in the IRB.
Yeah, and I want to just make clear when I say it's Christian led or me led or you led, that is not in isolation. I have assumed that we would circulate it and everybody would have a chance to weigh in. Because everybody's going to be bound by this thing. Everybody ought to have a chance to weigh in.
Yeah. So, I think the next steps are gonna be, I'm gonna ask, Kristen, Kristen or whoever, is in that job to help develop this. And so, um, whoever the program manager is will lack experience at this, but they'll be in charge of trying to herd the cats and get them in the same place to do their writing. So. And so you will, this has been noted and also recorded, and so expect to be asked for things as committed here.
This may come out over time. Do we have a target? So like the IRB meets once a month, is that right? Do we have a target submission window, or is that forthcoming after we compile this?
Uh, all my
Forthcoming,
stuff
okay.
on this is as soon as possible. I don't have it yet. I would like to have a target soon. That's it. That's my target. And I think that'll depend on a couple of things. One is a conversation with Kathy, to see if she would add anything. I don't see us doing this. I mean, I see submitting it by the winter holidays to be a push for us. Do you agree with that?
Yep.
I'm just
That was
looking
kind
at their
of-
meeting dates. They have their meeting dates are online. The next one that we could get it in for if we were really fast would be getting it in by December 11th for their January 8th meeting. It's essentially you have to get it in about a month in advance. And their
I don't see us
meetings,
completing this by December 11th.
I don't either. So then the next submission date would be January 15th for a February 12th review,
Shoot.
February 12th for March 12th review.
Ugh. Well, I clearly should have kicked this off earlier. So we probably need to talk about, yeah. I don't think we're ready to go into the field by any means. But we probably should take a meeting to talk about where we're really at in terms of schedule.
Agreed. My recommendation is that I mean, there's a lot more to an IRB protocol for those who don't know than just what are the risks and how are we addressing them. There's just a huge amount of stuff. There's the informed consent documents, there's the flyers, every single thing has to be reviewed and approved. And there's like 19 sections in some of these things, plus the auxiliary forms. I am thinking though, December 11th is totally non-realistic. I'm going to suggest we see how far we can get by January 15th. Not thinking we're going to get it ready by then, but
I
let's
think
just
we
see how
push for
far we
that.
can get.
Thank you.
That I think that's a stretch goal. It's a really stretch goal, but I think we should give it a shot because we're probably not going to make it, but that would make it realistic to make the February 12th.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. I feel sobered.
Tammy, are you going to send this out? I'm asking because this is something I want to work on over this next week. I've got a little flexibility over the next week. I would love to start at least without maybe getting into some of the numbers, at least getting qualitative text together on some of these risks. So if you can send out at least like the list of here's the things that we
The list
came
of
up with.
risks.
Yeah, the list of risks.
So
then
I've taken notes and I was going to paste them into our meeting notes document. And then if you need the link, I can send it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have requests? All right, folks, have a great holiday.
Thanks, you as well.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.